All right. Are we live? This is why you do not screw around with your audio. It's so... Oh. That air handler. I hate that air handler. Do not screw around with your audio right before you go live. It's not... You should never... You know what? If it works when you start, don't screw around with it. Oh my god. So annoying. Okay, so welcome to Wirecast Wednesday for the 8th of July, 2020. I am in my basement. Same place I was last week. You can see there's Evil Dead 2 behind me. Just tilt up for a second. You can see the poster. It's actually an import poster that we got many, many years ago, and it's been in that frame for many, many, many years. It's kind of like an alternate poster for that movie, which is one of our well-loved films, both me and my husband. So welcome to the Bonus Parts A to Z. And again, for anyone who's not familiar, the Bonus Parts A to Z was a challenge that I set to myself at the beginning of this calendar year when things were normal and sane. Or at least a little bit saner than they are right now, and a little bit more normal. I challenged myself to write a blog post about a topic, 26 topics, each starting with, one letter of the alphabet. So I've done A through N so far, and this week we're up to O. What I did was I combined it with this thing I call Wirecast Wednesdays, and Wirecast is a streaming program that I use for my work, and it's always a good idea to stay familiar with programs that you use, even if you only use them a couple times per year, which is the case with Wirecast for me and my job. So I installed Wirecast on my take-home laptop, and I play with it every week just to make sure there aren't any new updates, nothing like really funky changes, to make sure that it stays compatible with the typical streaming platforms that we use, which tend to be YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or Periscope, which is what Twitter uses for their live streaming, longer pieces. So right now you're going to see my eyes darting around. That's because I have this other laptop sitting over here that's running the Periscope feed, so I can see it and hear it if I want to. And then behind the Wirecast is the Facebook feed and the YouTube feed. So it's a little confusing. I'm sorry if my eye doesn't stay on the camera at all times. Plus there's this image of myself, this double image of myself, which is very distracting. It's just you see yourself on a screen and your eyes are drawn there. So it's a little bit difficult. But no updates for Wirecast for this week, at least. We're still on the same version that we've been on for the last several weeks. And everything is working fine with my usual stream settings. My CPU use is about 40%. That's about normal for this machine, and with 3 simultaneous streaming outputs. They're all pretty good quality. I'm just looking at the Periscope one right now. Generally speaking, about 4,000 between 3,000 and 4,000 kbps in terms of my stream output. So that's pretty good, and nothing dropped. So yay. Okay, back to the Bonus Parts A to Z. So this week we are on the letter O, and that is origin stories. And I want to talk a little bit about my personal origin story as a writer. And I always, whenever someone brings up origin stories, I always think about this line from a movie called The Specials. And one of the characters, Amok, says to the leader of the team who's about to go off on this, long, rambling story, Amok says, "Nobody wants to hear your boring effing origin story." And I always think of that line when the idea of origin stories comes up. And I'm not sure that you're going to be interested in hearing my boring fucking origin story, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. Some of you have heard this before, I'm sure. I've relayed this story before. But when I was a very little girl, my sister, Midori, whom I adore, I love her so much, She's my older sister. She's older than me by 3 years, and she is a voracious reader. My dad used to say that she would read a cereal box. Just because it's something to read. And I remember her reading cereal boxes, like sitting at the breakfast table before school, and she'd just be like engrossed in what was on the back of the cereal box. I don't know if they still write things on the back of cereal boxes the way that they used to anymore. Like, we don't get that kind of cereal. We get, like, granola in a bag. So if you know that they do that, let me know. Hit me up in the comments, and let me just go to launch a different page so I can actually, like, kind of keep track of what my comments are in case any come in. So yeah, my sister instilled in me a love for reading, this great love for reading, and I credit her with pushing me to read. I remember her reading like little golden books to me when I was really little. I can't remember which ones. There was like a Sleeping Beauty one. No, maybe it was like a Cinderella one, and like the picture of the queen in this book really freaked me out. But my sister would read this book to me. Like, I think I was like both scared and I really wanted her to read it to me at the same time. And of course, she could read more than I could. It just, her reading level was 3 years ahead of me. Probably more. She was probably like 10 years ahead of me in terms of reading level, because she was so advanced in her own reading. But she helped me to advance really quickly. And I remember her like teaching me how to write my name, with letters on we had this chalkboard in our house, and she would teach me how to write words and my name and how to read things. And then as we got older, she was into stories and books and comic books that were 3 years ahead of me. So she was reading the New Mutants when I probably still would have been reading Archie comics. There's nothing wrong with Archie comics. They were great comics. There's nothing wrong with New Mutants comics either. But she was always like pushing, not actively, but just by virtue of her reading more complicated and more mature things. She was kind of like pushing me to be a better reader, like read kind of beyond my level. So I credit her with that. And we would, of course, as siblings do, or at least in my experience, siblings do, we would play act. So, we would read something in a comic book or in a book, or, see something on TV or go to the movies, and we would be, something would capture our imagination. So if it, might be the X-Men, it could be, the Gelfling from the Dark Crystal. We would go home and we would have these like little adventures. And my sister, she had a couple of like wooden, wood crafted homemade like daggers. She had this one really nice one that was made out of like dowel rods or something. And she wrapped it in aluminum foil and yarn, and it was like, that was her dagger, and it was awesome. Like, I will say that that dagger was awesome. I still think that. I preferred, for the most part, curtain rods, those like metal adjustable curtain rods, because they'd make a little ting sound when you hit them against something. And those were always like my swords. My sister had this dagger that she made and that she loved, but I would just like, grab a curtain rod from the closet and just like swing that thing around in our upstairs when we would play. But this play, what this play did is it was about creating stories. It was as much about playing and having fun and having these little adventures to ourselves as it was about making stories. I didn't realize that at the time, and it's not like we set out to make stories, but that's what it did. It taught me about story creation and like storytelling, and those were the first stories that I created. And I think that's typical of a lot of kids. You play act and you come up with your own ideas and your own characters and your own worlds, even though you might be like borrowing from Star Wars or Sherlock Holmes or The Hunger Games or, whatever you're into. I realized that I just chose like 3 sci-fi stories. There are other worlds, of course, that you can choose from. I don't know. Maybe there is some kid out there who does like Desperate Housewives play acting. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't put it past them. Or what's the Kardashian catching up with the Kardashians or something like that. I don't know. I don't watch those shows. Maybe they pretend they're on Survivor or something. It's all about like creating these stories, and I think that's predominantly one of the main ways that kids learn to craft stories. It's not any kind of formal teaching. It's just like the way that our brains work, and I firmly believe that we're designed to tell stories, to make stories, and to share them with each other. Whether that's through play or through typing them out online or through a hard copy book. So anyway, we would play, and play eventually turned into recording stories. We had this old audio recorder that we would tape, just us like saying stupid shit, and we'd be like, oh, let's see how it turned out, and like play it back, and those were hilarious. But we started to write things down too, and that's where it really, I think I really started to become a writer. And again, I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't say like, oh yeah, now I'm a writer because I write stories. Like that's not, it was like I wanted to write down these feelings and these characters and these situations and scenes. And we would sometimes collaborate on stories, so we would do like little round robin type stories, and we would do those with other people in the family. And eventually we moved to writing our own stuff. And again, I've mentioned this before, there was a point when we were probably like preteens or young teenagers, and on Christmas morning we would swap stories because we weren't allowed to go downstairs to the tree before, it couldn't be an ungodly hour, and we were always up at an ungodly hour. We'd be up at like 5:30 a.m. And our parents were like, you cannot get us up that early. Like, you got to wait till at least 8 or 9. My dad worked third shift, second and third shift, like all his life. So he was used to waking up at like 10:30. And for us to wake up, want to get up at 8:15, that was not going to fly. So my sister and I came up with this idea that we would write stories on Christmas Eve, and we would trade stories on Christmas morning. And that was like the best thing about Christmas for so many years. Like, that's what I looked forward to. It was like, yes, spending, Christmas Eve dinner and, the lights and the singing at Mass, or, performing with the chorus, presents under the tree. Those were all like really nice, and I loved that experience. But I loved getting a new story from my sister. I loved that. And I loved writing a story for her because it was, she was like my first critic. She was the person who was like, didn't really like this. And that would devastate me. There was one story she didn't like, and I got so mad. And it wasn't because I was mad that, she didn't like it. It's that I was so hurt that I didn't do so, I wrote something that didn't impress her. Like that hurt me. Victoria, you might not remember this situation at all, but I remember it kind of clearly. Being so upset about, like I had written something. It was probably just like I wrote about some character you didn't give 2 shits about. and you were like, I don't really, whatever. And I took it so personally, which was so stupid, but also so me, and so like, teenagery of me as well. But I loved those stories. I still have a notebook with a couple of those original stories. There's like a visionary story in there, and then there's like Moon Knight's Kids. There's that story is still in it. Like, I still have these things, and they're cheesy as shit, man. they're really pretty bad, but they were they were written with such love, and even writing, even reading them now, going back and reading them now and seeing how bad they are, there's still something kind of lovely that, my memory of writing that and sharing that, with her, it fills me with so much joy and love for that time in our lives. And she is probably the one person to have read, most of my developmental writing. When we were no longer living in the same house, she went off to college, and then I went off to college 3 years later. She was up in Niagara, and I was down in the Bronx at Fordham, and we weren't really trading stories at that point. It wasn't easy. We didn't have PDFs to shoot back and forth really quickly. So we sort of lost that side of things, and that was kind of hard. I never really, I didn't find another reader who was close to me in the same way as she was. For many, many years. And, I probably, to be honest, there's no one who's been that close to me. No one in my family now really reads what I write. It's just, I don't know. I don't write things that appeal to most people in my family. For whatever reason. But, my sister and I went our separate ways in terms of story crafting. She went into, collaborative role play stuff. So, she has a group that, she works with, and they do extemporaneous story crafting. I'm more on the traditional side, and I do, this, hard typing and go through the editing process and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's my origin story. That's how I got started as a writer. As I had this, jumping jack situation where I went from being a reader and being taught how to read stories, and then kind of making my own stories as a play actor, and then turning to writing stories down on paper. So it's sort of oh my goodness, it's sort of like being an audience member, and then you move to being an actor, and then acting doesn't quite satisfy anymore, so you want to go to the writing and the creating and the directing stage. And that's kind of what being a writer is you take these roles of producer and writer and director, and you kind of move these characters around and create stories and scenes and plots and progression and dialogue and sometimes songs and and everything that is related to the kind of story that you are telling and you are crafting. So like I said, that's my origin story. Character origin stories, I don't do them a lot, I don't think. Usually the characters that I pick up or that I put into stories, they are already kind of they're already formed in a lot of ways. I mean, hopefully they grow over time, but for example, number 7, it's not an origin story for him. It's just this kind of adventure that he has with his friends and the people that he loves. I guess if I went back and wrote more, the number 7 story could serve as an origin story for Kirill, but Kirill's story isn't really that interesting. After what happens in the book, it's not really that. There's not a whole lot of places to go for that character. The space opera characters, I guess it's kind of like a group origin story, but again, they come basically fully formed into this this situation that they find themselves in. So yeah, I don't love origin stories, A lot of movies tend to take origin stories and they go at that very basic level. It's like, well, let's tell you how Spider-Man got his powers. It's like, we all know how Spider-Man got his powers. You know, he was bitten by a radioactive spider, and you know he creates his web shooters and goes around swinging. And Uncle Ben dies, and you know he has to take care of Aunt May. We all know every part of that. You know, you don't need to keep telling the origin story. What I find more interesting is knowing these kind of like, you know, personal origin stories. So, if you're watching this video and if you enjoyed it, and if you would like to, hey, come here, and if you would like to share. Please let me know what your origin stories are, how you got started in writing, or how you got started in, you know, creating whatever art it is that you do. I hope you enjoyed my little 20 minutes of rambling. This put me back in a great place, mentally and emotionally speaking, just like thinking about those early days. So I'm grateful for that. It has been a tiring week since last week. A lot of internal stuff has happened. A lot of outside things have come to a head. Some good, some not so good, but we march on. So with that, I will let folks go. As always, please stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, don't touch your face, keep your distance from other people when you can, and just, you know, be calm, stay safe, and I hope to see you all again soon.